Hey community, welcome to Behind the Message. My name is Sherry Banky and I'm the Adult Ministry Director at our Naperville location. And I'm joined today by Ted Canaris. He's our community pastor at our Downers Grove location. Thanks for joining me today.
Glad to be here.
To discuss the message. We're in week 3 of what we're actually against. We're kind of wrapping up this series. And so since I heard you give the message, I have one burning question that I think everyone might be asking as well.
Should I be nervous? I'm a little nervous.
Who actually does the laundry at the Canaris household?
That is a good question. So my wife primarily does the laundry.
Okay.
We're big like divide and conquer with all the
Absolutely.
different parts of the home. That's primarily one of her jobs. But our oldest son, is starting to do his own laundry. Very mixed results, but we're starting to get our kids to do that as well.
No, I love it. We have made that transition in our household where our boys do their own laundry, and sometimes that means it sits in their basket and they wear really wrinkly clothes, but as long as I'm not doing it.
Yeah, as soon as they
it's fine
really
by
start
me.
smelling, that's when it's the perfect time.
Yes.
The transition. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So let's dive right in. I love this Good Samaritan story. And I think if we've spent any time in church, we're probably pretty familiar with this story.
Yeah.
Would you be able to maybe give us a cultural context into the significance of the Samaritan being the good neighbor in this story?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to find a present day context in our culture right now.
Yeah.
But there was such a visceral and like a personal hostility between these two people groups.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like right now in our world, Russia invading Ukraine, they're like the villains, right?
Right.
So it's sort of like that in a cultural sense. It's
Okay.
like what you would see is like the bad guy is in the story that they're
Right.
telling one another. It's so owned so deeply in the cultural story that it's like personal as well.
Right, right.
So like a Samaritan, like it would make you like, oh, like when you see that person you're in conflict with. Like
Right.
it's that kind of tension between these two groups is really
Right.
significant.
Yeah. So why do you think Jesus chose that kind of character to be the good neighbor in this story?
He's good at teaching, and he's really good at teaching in a way that's memorable and in a way that shocks his listeners and really proves the point in such a deep way. You know, you might think, well, the good neighbor would be the priest or the Levite. I mean, that's sort of the assumption. Those are the sort of highest in the social
Right.
class, the people where if they looked at the Samaritans with disdain, they looked at the priest and the Levite with honor and respect, right? But they were the ones who failed to live out the law. It was actually the Samaritan, which they believed was outside of the law,
Yeah.
that's the one who faithfully lived it out. And so he's showing that actually like it's about your heart and not about your position.
Oh, wow.
And so it's just a complete flip. He took the highest of society and the lowest of society and showed us that it's actually the heart of this one that elevates him in the eyes of God. It's really a beautiful thing.
It is. Jesus is very provocative in his storytelling,
man.
and very intentional as well. You know, he wants us to remember it.
Yeah.
So you talk about 3 actions that can kind of demonstrate this generosity that we see
Yeah.
in the Good Samaritan, where he talks about the heart, time, and money.
Yeah.
So of those 3, is there one that's kind of easier for you to kind of respond to?
Yeah, I think heart is the easiest one for me because it requires nothing. I think it's probably like the easiest one for most of us. Like I can see a need and it feels almost natural to like have my heart go out to that person.
Right.
But when it comes to like actually taking action, that's where it gets a little bit more difficult with our time or with our resources.
Yeah. So with that, is there one that's more challenging for you?
Yeah, I think definitely time right now is
Yeah.
the most challenging one for me. I find myself just filling my schedule with too much, honestly, and I don't keep the margin I need to be available when a need arises.
I think that's probably the case for a lot of us. I know for me, time seems to be kind of that most valuable resource that
Yeah,
I have, and
totally.
the most scarce that I have as well.
Totally.
You know, but yet I feel my schedule really full.
Yeah.
So I don't seem to have margin or
Yeah.
anything as well. So it's a challenge to kind of revisit that.
Yeah.
One thing that I really love about this story of the Good Samaritan, because it really just has nuggets of wisdom, is how it does demonstrate healthy boundaries, where the Good Samaritan, he takes care of this injured person, but he still goes about and does his work, what he's responsible for and what he's responsible to. He involves the other members of the community to kind of help and serve them.
Like the innkeeper, you mean?
Yeah, like the innkeeper,
Okay.
and leaves them there and,
Yep.
and then comes back to check. And I know within our community, and this is a tension that I just kind of see through just the various people who attend community, is we can hear this story. And I think if we have a healthy sense of boundaries, we realize, out of this overflow of love, I serve as a good neighbor. But I also have seen where people who maybe don't have a good sense of healthy boundaries serve out of this effort to earn love. Can you talk about the nuance there a little bit between that?
I think the most important thing to consider as you're having this conversation is what you said right at the end there about the motivation behind the serving. Because I think you can do an extraordinary amount of works and service from a heart of gratitude and one that isn't looking for something in return and still be energized. Like that's possible. But you can do a very little amount of giving and have an attitude of like bitterness or I'm just doing this because I have to, or because it's required of me, or that person expects it of me. And even just a little bit of service from that heart will totally drain you.
Yeah.
So while yes, boundaries are super important, and this is sort of a both and, not an either or.
Right.
I think the most important thing is, really addressing our heart. Like what is the disposition of our heart in what we're doing? Now, saying that, sometimes we can use the current state of our heart or our disposition as a way or a reason to not serve, because we're like, I don't want to do it because my heart's really not in it. And there's this sort of dynamic relationship between our heart and our actions. Sometimes,
that's true.
Sometimes our heart leads the way and our actions need to follow. Other times we need our actions to lead the way and trust that our heart's going to follow. And through that sort of participatory cycle of heart and action in obedience to the leading of the Holy Spirit, we find real transformation. Only the person can really discern that in their heart. Like, where am I now? And God, what are you leading me to right now? Do I need to put my action first, even though my heart isn't there, knowing that you'll bring it along? Or is this something that I need to wait on and work on before I take this step? And I think that's an important discernment piece.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of the overarching theme of this story that Jesus shares, but also I think his entire ministry is just loving others as you love yourself.
Yeah.
And I think loving yourself is really important. I know self-care is kind of a buzzword that we have right now, but what are some practices that you have that help you love yourself well so you can love others well?
Spiritually, I guess, starting inside out, right? So my physical body, taking care of my body, taking care of my relationship with God first and foremost, daily, spending time in the Word and in prayer. If I don't do that, and if I'm not in physically taking care of myself, I'm already starting out bad.
Yeah.
And then prioritizing those other most important relationships, like my marriage and my children, making sure that I'm giving them my best and not just my leftover scraps. And I found that if I can, in a sense, love myself through prioritizing the way that God has ordered for us to live, I'm much better in every other arena. I'm much more able to serve and love even more people as a result of that solid foundation in my life and in my heart and even in my physical body.
Yeah, it's like we have to start daily, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a reason why we have a new day, right?
Yeah.
New opportunity to begin that.
Yeah.
So inevitably, we kind of have the time constraints of our messages whenever we give them. So is there anything that was kind of left on the cutting room floor that you would like to share with the community regarding?
Really, it's that statement, love your neighbor as yourself. I would love just to talk about that for an entire message, because I think it's a statement that we're all probably pretty familiar with and have heard before. And we've heard it enough that the severity and sort of the radical nature of that statement doesn't quite impact us. It's like we've been inoculated.
Yeah.
Like we've heard it so many times that it's so familiar that it sounds normal. But if you really thought about what that would mean, to love your neighbor as you love yourself, with an equal kind of love, it's completely radical. Like there's nothing mundane or ordinary about that call and about that statement. It is shocking. And it's a bar that none of us can reach, but it's ultimately what Jesus accomplished for us. He perfectly lived that out. He loved us so self-sacrificially that he died for us. And that's kind of the bar of Jesus' life. We can look at it and say, oh my God, this is beautiful. That he could actually love people as he loved. He perfectly lived that out. And the miracle of that is that Jesus invites us into that story, where we become a part of that picture of what he's doing and what he's painting in the world through the power of his Holy Spirit, and not through our own goodness or our moral sort of excellence. And so I would have loved to talk a lot more about that, because I think it's something that if we could really let that statement impact us, it would really be transformative.
Yeah, and move us to action. I know
Yeah.
Jesus ends the story with "Go and do likewise."
Yeah.
Right, following the ways of that I have done that as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thanks for answering the questions that I have here for our current Behind the Message. Week 3, we are wrapping up this series, but please don't miss out. Next week, we're starting a brand new series called Do the Work. We'll hope you will join us next week at Community Online. And for any questions that you have about community, please visit us at communitychristian.info. Have a great week, and we'll see you right back here next week. Bye. And so how do we kind of guard against that kind of?
Well, I think that might be a better question to talk about, like the motivation behind it rather than like self-care.
What is that?
It is a pillow that is stuck to the painted couch.
Oh my gosh.
Like so stuck that it...
That's a painted couch?
The secret's been let out. It was an orange couch that we used
That's
for...
the orange
That's the orange couch!
Oh my gosh.